Thank you to our musicians for that beautiful music. The year was 1999, and I was taking advanced pottery in my senior year of college. I'd already taken the intro class. I already knew the basics. I knew how to center the clay on the wheel, which is harder than it looks. And I knew how to pull the clay upward into the kind of vessel I wanted to make. I had some experience by then. I had some experience pushing the clay to its limits and, more importantly, knowing my own limits. But the assignment in class on that particular day was to make a piece of pottery over 12 inches tall. And out of the four of us in the class, only my friend Tommy had ever been able to do it. So we all sat down at our wheels and we all got to work. Next to me on my right, Tommy quickly had a pot of about 1.5 feet tall, seemingly didn't take him very much effort at all. And on the other side of me on my left, another student did her best, but I could tell she was struggling. I tried making a thin vase, figuring that the straighter the walls, the less likely it would be to collapse. As the wheel spun, I pulled the sides up and up and up until I had passed 10 inches on the muddy ruler I had next to the wheel, and I decided to make one final effort. I had one hand inside of the clay and another on the outside, and I pulled the vase upward from the bottom the way you're supposed to do it, and the whole thing came apart in the middle. And the clay twisted in my hands like wet laundry, and my vase tumbled down into a heap. In the scripture passage that Larry just read for us, we hear about the prophet Jeremiah's visit to the potter's house. We hear about how Jeremiah heard God telling him to go and visit the potter who lived in the town where he was. God told Jeremiah to go and watch the potter work. I too sometimes get to watch the potter work. It just so happens that I did Jeremiah one better. It just so happens that I live in the potter's house. I ended up hanging out a while longer with that undergrad at the wheel next to me that day in college. Her name was Jessa, and we've been married for 25 years now. Yeah. That's the origin story. If God ever told me to go to the potter's house, I would not have far to go because Jessa is now a professional potter, and her studio is right between the dining room and the back patio, and she can definitely make things taller than 1 foot now. So while I no longer make any pottery myself, I do spend a lot of time around pottery, and I can confirm the accuracy of the story that Larry read for us from the book of Jeremiah. Sometimes, as Jeremiah tells us, sometimes the vessel you are making is spoiled in your hands. But even if you have never touched clay, you can probably also confirm the accuracy of the story about Jeremiah in the potter's house. Because that is the way things go, isn't it? That is the way sometimes things are. Sometimes we try as hard as we can, sometimes we give it our best effort, and sometimes things just do not work out. Life, as far as I can tell, life is a lot to do with failure. Life is a lot to do with things not going according to plan. The world is a humbling place. And sometimes it feels like the more you imagine that you might have the answers, the more humbling life can become. Potters know that you can do your best. You can know the materials, you can make your plans, and sometimes you still end up staring at clumps of twisted clay. That is the story of the potter in Jeremiah's visit to the potter's house, and I think that is our story too, here in this church. In the past decade or so, we have thought a lot of thoughts, and we have prepared a lot of preparations, and we have researched a lot of research. We have discerned our fair share of discernment, and we have made a lot of plans. But in none of those plans did we ever intend to end up right where we are today. There were ways we thought things would go, there were outcomes we planned to see, and more than once we have found our plans unfulfilled. More than once we have found ourselves disappointed. More than once, we have found ourselves like the potter in Jeremiah's story, staring down at where he had expected to create something beautiful, and instead looking at a pile of twisted clay. If you don't know the story, here's what I mean when I talk about unfulfilled plans. You see, once upon a time, this congregation was enormous. Once upon a time, this congregation was prestigious, and this sanctuary was always full. Once upon a time, everything was going great, and then came the long and steady decline of mainline Protestantism in the United States. And this congregation has pushed back against that as hard as we can, but it has affected us anyway. And then a longtime senior minister retired, and then an interim minister came to get us ready for a new senior minister. And then that new senior minister came, and not more than a few months later, a pandemic arrived too. And that senior minister, like about 40% of clergy during the pandemic, that senior minister began to think about following her calling elsewhere, and she did. And that same interim minister came back to get us ready for another new senior minister, and then a new senior minister came, and after only a year, we agreed to part ways. And now here I am, your fifth senior minister in about 6 or 7 years, and none of the plans we ever made look much like the place where we are right now. None out of all the plans we have made have really worked out the way we thought. None of the clay twisted and slumped in front of us looks much like the vessel we have been working so hard to create. Do you know what potters call it when pots get ruined? I'm going to let you in on some insider pottery lingo here. The clay of a spoiled vessel, the thing Jeremiah is describing, the slumped and ruined clay that's left after a piece of pottery goes wrong, potters call that reclaim. It's not garbage, it's not throwaway, it's not discard. That leftover clay is called reclaim, and it is very valuable because it represents the potential for something new. You see, once a piece of pottery is fired, once it goes through the kiln, and once it is vitrified, the clay is set, the shape is final, and whatever flaws there were in the vessel will be there forever. There's not much you can do at that point to reclaim it. But in those stages of becoming, in those stages of creativity, when everything is fluid, during and after those moments of making, when failure is most likely, the clay left behind in a spoiled vessel is called reclaim because it can be reclaimed, because it must be reclaimed, because it's too valuable not to reclaim. If you've ever bought a handmade piece of pottery from a working potter, there is a very good chance that you have bought a vessel made of pieces of at least several other vessels that were tried and that failed and that were reclaimed to make something new. Everything new always holds pieces of the past, and everything successful always carries with it the raw elements of disappointment. That's a little bit like our lives, isn't it? That is a little bit like what it's like to be alive. Maybe there's someone out there who's always been successful at everything. Maybe there's someone here whose best efforts have always paid off, but that has not been my experience. It seems to me that life is a lot about turning the disappointments of the past into the triumphs of the future. It seems to me that life is a lot about reclaiming the leftovers of failures to turn into the raw materials of something beautiful and new. Here is the trick to reclaiming clay. Here's the trick to turning the twisted, slumped past of a failed piece of pottery into the beauty of something new. The trick, as I see it, the trick is to learn from the past and at the same time forget about it. Even the best potters lose pieces all the time. The potter that Jeremiah went to visit seems to have been very normal that way. Just like you, just like me, the best potters you have ever met have seen their work collapse into a pile, or they have seen their work spin out of control. The trick is to learn from the past and understand what the past has taught you, and at the same time to move quickly past the way it feels to fail. The trick is to expect success next time, to trust that what you have learned will serve you well as you begin again. The trick is to learn while not dwelling on the way things went wrong, while not blaming yourself, and while not giving up, because the moment of failure is very often, the moment of disappointment is usually the last thing that happens before the emergence of something beautiful and new. Here's how it works. You take the things that have gone wrong, the very things that only moments ago or days ago you were trying to make beautiful, and you take those things and you work them in your hands. You work them in your hands just like Jessa has been doing for a few minutes now. You take those pieces of failed pottery and you reclaim them. You turn their still recognizable shapes into themselves again and again until you once more have a piece of clay ready to become something new. Whatever doomed the last piece, whatever made it collapse or tilt, or wherever its walls were too thin or too far stretched, you take it all and you make it into a new starting point and you begin again. That is where we are right now. Today we are at that moment of beginning again. That is the power of seeing our current moment not as a moment of disappointment, but as a starting point for something new. Today we have the raw materials needed to be creative and visionary. Today we have what we need to make something beautiful. We have behind us 160 years of successes and failures to draw on. We have in front of us a list of commitments we have made as a congregation, commitments to welcoming and affirming and embracing people of all genders and sexualities, commitments to work for mental health justice, commitments to work for racial justice and justice in immigration, and commitments to reduce gun violence and seek justice for the earth, to name only a few. Commitments which are more important than ever at this moment, right now, in 2025. We have commitments to be here for each other and commitments to seek God's presence in this world. We have resources many communities could only dream about. We have a building big enough and finely appointed enough to serve our needs, and if it doesn't serve our needs, we have property valuable enough to support whatever is next. And we have money in the bank. New churches start all the time with $0, with a few people gathered in someone's living room, and here we are, with a building and an endowment and strong annual giving and dozens of faithful people committed to showing up to do God's justice and show God's love in a broken world. That is what is most important of all. We have all of us. Whether this is our first time here or whether we were baptized here as a baby 80 years ago, we have all of us together who have chosen this community at this moment in time. Whatever has happened in the past has happened, and we cannot change the past, but we can reclaim it. We can reclaim it. We can turn these raw materials into something new and creative and brave and visionary, something we have not even dreamed of yet, something God alone can see. Maybe you've been watching the clay take shape here on the wheel. It does not get old, does it? I like giving sermons with pottery demonstrations. We've done this maybe 4 or 5 times together, and I like it because I know for a fact that nobody's looking at me. I like it better that way. You're looking at this pottery wheel. Even if you have seen someone making pottery 1,000 times, even if you have done it yourself, it does not get old watching the shape of something beautiful emerge from a lump of clay. That is what comes next for us. That is the moment of creativity and beauty that comes next for this community. I don't know what shape it will take. I don't know what size it will be. I don't know anything about it, except I know that it will be beautiful, and I know that we will make it together. At the end of this service, once this piece of pottery is done, after the benediction and during the postlude, or as you're leaving this sanctuary, I want to invite you to come forward in your own time as you feel moved, and I want to invite you to put your thumbprint on this piece of pottery that is coming into being, while it is still fluid, while it is still changing, before it goes into the kiln and turns into something more permanent. I want you, if you are willing to do it, I want you to leave your impression on this vessel as a way of saying that you will be a part of making what comes next here. Your thumb will get a little muddy, and there will be bowls of water on the way out where you can rinse off. And if you are online this morning, we have someone monitoring the chat. Just say in the chat that you'd like someone to leave a mark for you, and we will. But I want to invite us all to commit in this moment on this day. I want us to invite us all to leave our marks. I want to invite us all to commit to all the beauty and all the meaning that is still to come, and to commit to making together whatever comes next. We will fire this piece with all of our thumbprints on it. We will fire it and we will keep it here as a reminder of the ways we make the next thing together. As a reminder of the ways we were together on this day, pledging to each other to be collaborators in creativity with God. We will keep it as a reminder of a time of disappointment when we were not sure what would come next, but when we were sure of each other and we were sure of the stirrings of God's creative spirit. And someday when we see this piece, thumbprinted and fired and kept as a reminder, someday when we see it, or when the ones who come after us see it, we will remember, they will remember, we will all together remember that we were here to reclaim, that we were here to be open to what came next, that we were here together to be and to become what God was calling us to be. Amen.